Hi guys, and welcome to Movies in Lockdown, and today we'll be discussing episode 4 of WandaVision. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. Before we begin, this is going to be a spoilers discussion, so spoilers, and more spoilers. You've been warned. After the light-hearted nature of the previous 3 episodes, this episode takes a completely different approach, not just by having a much darker tone, but it also gives us a more compelling introduction to Monica, filling in some much-needed backstory by showing us what led her to being entrapped inside of Westview. That is, until Wanda decides she's overstayed her welcome. As Geraldine, we didn't really fully get to delve into her character properly to be able to appreciate her. This episode changes that in just a few minutes and paints a bigger picture as to who she has since become after all these years since we last saw her as a child in Captain Marvel. Right away, we dive into a familiar moment from the MCU, one of the last major events to happen within the world, the blip. The blip was basically Hulk undoing the snap which wiped out half the universe, Monica included. For 5 years prior to this, everyone who was snapped out of existence was pronounced dead. Monica, as presented here, seems like she is waking up from a nap or dream, which insinuates she has no memory of the snap even happening or that she was even dead. This makes sense, since most of the snapped had no clue as to what was happening. The whole ordeal was instant and without warning. Monica gets to resume her life, but not in the way she had hoped. We see her frantically searching for someone, a patient, in a now empty bed. Someone who was with her the moment she disappeared. Monica is literally lost as to what's happening around her. Yet she doesn't waste any time trying to figure out what is happening. She just presses forward in search of the patient. People are returning to the place where they were 5 years ago. The brief glimpses we get of some of the people returning is enough to paint a bigger picture on the effects the blip will have not just on them, but the world as a whole. You feel the plight that Monica is in. She is completely lost in the chaos, not sure where to go and who to turn to for help. Luckily, in all the madness that is happening at the hospital, one of the doctors is able to identify her, Dr. Hartley. Even she has questions as to what's happening, since she wasn't one of the snapped. It's through the interaction that we get an insight into her experience with the snap. She is certain that she was asleep for 20 minutes or so, which is far from the reality of what's happened. Time has passed, 5 years to be exact. It's then we find out who the patient is. It's none other than her mother, Maria Rambeau. Just before disappearing, Maria went into surgery for cancer, and it was a success. But despite that, it returned, and she passed within 2 years after her daughter's absence. You can see the truth is hard for her to swallow. Monica is in denial, and it's understandable. From her point of view, only a few minutes has passed, not years. She was completely robbed of whatever time she could have spent with her mother. This just brings up some of the psychological effects the snap would have on a person's life once they've returned from the dead. Just how much has their life changed as a result of their absence? And how do you go forward? Is it even possible to salvage what you're now left with? Not everyone can easily pick up where they've left off. The snap would have had some serious implications on so many people's lives. This exploration into Monica's experience with the blip gives us an emotional connection to her character. Now we are behind her and invested in seeing how her story goes moving forward. We jump ahead, sometime after that, and it looks like Monica has finally come to terms with what has happened during her absence. She's making her way to Sword, but having some trouble getting past security. Her pass has since expired. I love that we get a brief glimpse of a news broadcast detailing the events of the blip. It's another indication that it wasn't that long ago since it's happened, in terms of the timeline within the show. We learned that Maria Rambeau founded Sword. While a departure from the organization's origins in the comics, I really like this new approach for Sword. In the comics, SWORD's headquarters is a space station based just outside of Earth's orbit, rather than on Earth. Considering that Maria in the Captain Marvel movie was a pilot who had dreamed of going to space, which she eventually did, it makes sense that she would build an organization that's focused on space exploration. This really honors the memory of a character in a big way, and while we don't see her on screen, it was nice to spot a plaque at SWORD HQ showing her as she appeared in her early days. And who knows, there's always a chance there will be a flashback similar to the SHIELD flashbacks we had throughout other MCU films. It's interesting that we don't see Maria, but it adds so much more weight that we don't see her make an appearance even in a flashback. Just having her character mentioned by two people who meant a lot to her, you feel her presence and her legacy. I really wouldn't say no to an appearance by an older Maria. Maybe have Lashana Lynch return and age up for the part. Hopefully she's not too busy playing 007 to return to the MCU. This also reveals to us Monica's rank within SWORD. Here she's referred to as a captain by her now boss, who is serving as the acting director following Maria's passing. This suggests that Monica has had a really successful career thus far. It's also a rank that both her late mother and Aunt Carol shared when they were her age. That really is an achievement. Tyler Hayward, played by Just Stamberg, assigns her a mission, which he refers to as terrestrial, meaning it's Earth-based rather than space. Monica is keen to go back to her normal life, which is more or less space expeditions. But her mother has specifically instructed Tyler, whenever her daughter returns, to ease her into things, so she takes the mission. From their brief interaction, you can tell that Tyler and Monica have a good relationship, and she approves of his leadership and him taking over as director. This is where Jimmy Woo comes in and the whole Westview mystery. Jimmy Woo is basically investigating someone who's part of the FBI's witness protection program, a person who has suddenly disappeared without a trace, the only lead being that they were stationed in Westview, the very same town that Wanda and Vision have made their home. What's even weird is that Westview doesn't seem to exist. Despite both Jimmy and Monica being on the outskirts of the town, which is clearly visible, the town in question seems to be a place called Eastview, according to the local law enforcement, who seem to be affected, along with everyone else outside of the town, by some form of amnesia. Or is that magic? It really is nice seeing Jimmy Woo after his last appearance in Ant-Man and the Wasp. What's even better is that not to Scott Lang, who introduced Jimmy to the amazing world of close-up magic, aka card tricks. Jimmy seems to have it mastered and uses it ever so sleek in his intro. I can easily see him pulling that trick every time he introduces himself to someone for the first time. Monica begins conducting tests on the strange, almost unseen barrier that's just in front of them, first testing the range by sending in a drone through the energy field. The drone instantly disappears, out of sight. Curious, Monica touches the energy field herself, which causes her to get sucked in, disappearing. It's here we are witnessing how Monica ended up in Wanda's sitcom fantasy world, albeit taking on a different identity. As with any strange activity, you have to call in experts from the science community, who are experts in their field. So who is up to the job? Well, Darcy. Dr. Darcy Lewis. It is so nice to see Darcy, played by Kat Dennings, back in the MCU. She was a side character and Jane Foster's assistant, who appeared in the first two Thor films. While brilliant in her own right, she was mainly used for comedic relief. It's apparent that over the years, she's finally become a doctor in her field of study, and still has her familiar sense of humor. Darcy just so happens to end up being shadowed by one of the most unhelpful and unlikable SWORD agents. Seriously, this guy's a dick. Not only does he withhold information that could help her with her job, he watches her straining to lift a piece of equipment. Really, not a gentleman in his slightest. Using her scientific equipment, Darcy is able to pick up readings. To be specific, cosmic microwave background radiation, The radiation is supposedly contained within the area of Westview, but only for now. Could we see the radiation spread further outside of Westview? Something that's intriguing is that by using a variety of technology such as radar, LiDAR, soda, and infrared, they are able to map the town as Westview and get a number of readings which all illustrate the town as being pentagon shaped. This is notable since prior to this, we have had numerous instances where a pentagon is used in some form, either in the opening or closing credits of the sitcom style episodes. Still, with all the tech at their disposal and even the greatest minds, no one is able to get a visual showing inside of the town. No one except my girl Darcy. Using an old school vintage TV, Darcy is able to pick up the CMBR radiation, which is entwined with a broadcast frequency that allows them to pick up the best show on TV, WandaVision. So yeah, they are able to see what's happening inside of Westview. You gotta love Marvel. I love Marvel just being self-referential, asking the very same question fans and newcomers alike have asked about this show. So, you're saying the universe created a sitcom starring two Avengers? It really is one of the best lines of the episode, and I'm glad Jimmy is the one who delivers it. Did anyone notice the sword guy in the background just grinning while watching the screen? Guess he's enjoying the show. Despite the levity of the situation, catch the show later, buddy. There's still work to do. Jimmy acknowledging Darcy's skills is pretty nice. Everyone gathered to figure out this whole situation is pretty much stuck up, and Jimmy seems to be the only one who's down to earth and sees her as the asset she is in this whole operation. She, along with Jimmy Woo, teaming up together and making progress with the whole operation is wonderful to see. It shows they're not just comic relief side characters, but actually competent individuals. These two really work well off of each other. You get the sense that they don't just have a mutual respect working relationship with each other, but there's also a blossoming friendship. Over the next few days, or hours, as there's no indication of how much time has passed, we get to see them studying the show, piecing together information in hopes of finding out what's causing this. The whiteboard we get glimpses of is a really great way to communicate the information they're gathering and their whole thought process without having to verbally tell us every little detail. After some time, and identifying who's who within the show, they are able to confirm that the people we see, or at least the ones focused on in the show, are in fact real people and locals within the town. What's interesting here is the people that they managed to confirm and the people who they aren't able to identify. Looking at you, Agnes. By the time the second episode rolls around, they get their first glimpse of Monica within the sitcom world, and she's completely changed. But it does confirm that she's alive. As we have already seen, she's assumed a new identity within the world and becomes Geraldine. Is she aware of who she is, or is she just playing along? It's not quite certain. Even with all we have seen in the previous episodes, it's not quite clear-cut. Wu is again asking the same questions we have. Why is it a sitcom? And what or who is making them play along in this weird reality or whatever is happening? Thanks to a bit of dialogue from Jimmy, we are able to know exactly how much time has passed since Monica disappeared. It's only been 24 hours. Was I the only one who felt it when Darcy dropped her pot noodles? Oh boy. Yet again, Darcy is firing on all cylinders. She's able to come up with a way to use a transmitter to communicate through a radio within Westview. Yes, the very same radio that pops up in episode 2, while Wanda and Dottie are talking. The attempt to communicate with Wanda seemingly fails on their side, when in reality it does work, and Wanda, as we saw, did hear Jimmy. Instead, from Darcy's point of view, nothing happened. The whole scene of Wanda briefly hearing Jimmy isn't visible on the feed that Darcy is viewing. They receive a still image of a colorized helicopter, which is revealed to be the very same drone Monica uses, Like with everything else in the town, it has changed to fit with the time period and sitcom style. The helicopter is the same one that Wanda discovers outside of her house, when she was alerted by a strange noise. We also see the beekeeper creeping out of the sewers at the end of episode 2 was a sword agent sent in from underground through the sewers to infiltrate the town using a different route rather than going straight through like Monica. Unfortunately, the energy field around Westview extends even underground, and as with everything that crosses the barrier, the sword agent in the hazmat suit gets transformed into a beekeeper. It's great we get some clarity as to some of the weird happenings which seemed out of place within the sitcom setting. Well, some, not everything. Just like some of us probably reacted to the idea of Wanda and Vision having a baby, we see Jimmy doing the same. We then see them catch up to where we left off last episode. Wanda is confronting Geraldine. Again, there's a cut in this episode. This time Darcy acknowledges that something is strange with the feed. She attempts to rewind back the feed, but no matter how many times she tries, she can't go past the confrontation where Wanda glares at Monica. Before, there is a jump and the scene skips to the show's credits. Someone is interfering with the feed, basically censoring it. Wanda has completely dropped the act, and the wholesome light-hearted vibe that's usually present is now gone. Now there's a sense of tension and danger. Monica seems to be cornered, and it doesn't look good for her. She isn't able to answer Wanda's questions. You can see Wanda has had enough. For the first time within the show, she uses her powers, as we are used to seeing it on screen. The red energy she's able to manipulate from her hands. Before Monica can react, she's sent flying through Wanda's home, all the way outside of the barrier. It's a brief moment, but you can see Wanda is a bit shaken up by what she just did. Up until this point, she's never had to go all out and use her powers to this extent. Monica managed to trigger emotions that she was suppressing. She snaps out of it, then quickly proceeds to repair the damage to her home. Boy, she really sent Monica flying. Vision enters the house and asks Wanda, where is Geraldine? Wanda responds but recoils. It's then we see Vision from her point of view. He is literally the Vision we see as he appears after Thanos ripped this Infinity Stone from his head. You see Vision pale, his eyes white, and his head caved in. It really is a horrifying moment. He's a dead corpse walking. It's clear that he has been reanimated by Wanda. As she looks up back again, we see the normal Vision. He seemingly reverted back to his usual self, no longer looking like a shell of himself. He reassures his wife, telling her that they can go wherever they want. Wanda smiles, and in turn she states that they can't go, before reassuring him that this is their home, and that she has everything under control. With everything that has happened up to now, added with Wanda's actions, it certainly looks like Wanda is the one that's pulling the strings here, creating this world around her and Vision to live out a happy life. Well, as much as I love Wanda, it's clear none of this is going to last much longer. With the outside world trying to get inside of Westview, and even some unseen forces at work, you can be sure things are not going to end well for this family. We see Monica being examined by medics. Somehow she's fine, and she utters what we as an audience, and even she has discovered. It's Wanda. This whole revelation paints Wanda to be the villain of the story. For now, it's anybody's guess as to where this whole storyline will go. Has Wanda really lost her mind? Why did Wanda pick this particular town? What exactly drew her there? Is she really doing this all by herself, or is someone or something else at play here? Did Wanda go back to Wakanda and retrieve Vision's lifeless body? If the townspeople are real, are Wanda's children real, or are they just a figment she conjured up? I'm sure all of these and more will be answered in the coming episodes. Episode MVP. Okay, so this was a tough one. I couldn't choose a single person for the MVP of the episode. So for the first time ever, we have a joint tie between a number of characters. For me, I was only vaguely familiar with Tiona Paris's work from her role on Dear White People. which was a small sample size. But when she was cast as an adult Monica, I thought, yeah, she looks like a grown up version of Monica. This really was Monica's time to shine. I really have to give Tiana Paris huge credit for her acting in the opening minutes of this episode. The emotion she brought to the scene in the hospital had me heartbroken. From what we already know, she's set to appear in Captain Marvel 2, but I really hope she pops up in the Miss Marvel TV show alongside Miss Marvel herself, Imam Villani. Randall Park, who I know from Always Be My Maybe and Fresh Off the Boat, is so refreshing to see him return as Jimmy Woo. It's great they found a way to utilize his character in the show. I really hope after WandaVision, he pops up in future MCU projects. Now, for the final MVP of the episode, Kat Dennings. Almost stole the show completely for me. I've always been a fan of hers, especially when she was in Two Broke Girls. She really had some of the best comedic moments throughout this episode. From her job as a scientist who she nicknamed Boy Scout, and the ongoing coffee gag. Why couldn't someone get her a cup of coffee? She wasn't asking for much. Plus, she was the most resourceful. You just gotta love Darcy. Anyways, that's all for this episode. This was easily my favorite episode so far. It's unbelievable that so much happened within 20 minutes. I honestly keep forgetting how short these episodes are. Episode 4 can't get here any sooner. So as usual, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the show. Please feel free to subscribe, like, and comment below. And hey, maybe this wasn't your cup of tea, and that's okay. Just remember to take care and stay safe.